Welcome to Halftime. I'm Doug Piper, and I'm a halftime alumni from Greenville, South Carolina, in the USA, and I appreciate your joining us today. Now, Halftime is the world's leading peer learning center for successful people who are in transition, and we teach, coach, and connect leaders who are looking for more meaning, joy, and impact in their next season. Now, please vote in today's polls. You can see it down at the bottom of the screen. That helps shape today's event as we will cater it to exactly how you're answering the polls. They take just a moment to answer. You can submit your questions for us in the Ask a Question field, and we'll answer them in the second half. So look down there at the bottom of the screen and click on that Ask a Question field. An exciting opportunity is we have a couple of slots left for a roundtable in the North Carolina Triangle area and also in Charlotte, North Carolina. So this is going to be starting in 2022, and you can email Lloyd if you want to find out if that's something that suits and works for you. So there's a green button down there at the bottom. Click on that, and Lloyd will provide you with more information. But today, we have halftime alumni Mike Shields, and he's going to share with us his experience with the missing piece. Patience is part of finding your purpose. Now, we all know that finding our purpose in life can really be slow, challenging, and maybe even frustrating. But we've all seen people who seem to have found their purpose and are living it to their fullest. Well, we'll all likely go through several renewals in life. And this is part of a three-part series on finding your life purpose. Now, previously, we discussed the science of finding your purpose in life. But there's 4 common stages that we actually go through. Today, we're going to explore how patience and waiting are actually part of God's plan to help us find our purpose. Now, in the next 30 minutes, Lloyd and I will explore this with halftime alumni Mike Shields. Now, Mike's having the time of his life 15 years after finding his purpose journey, but he's going to discuss today that before that, he really needed a lot of patience, and hearing more about that may help you. Well, let's get our guests on screen. We have Mike Shields. He is the president and CEO of Piedmont Trust, as well as numerous boards. He has 3 decades of experience in financial services. And the last 10 years, he's been focusing on investing wisely, living with purpose, and finishing well. We also have Halftime Institute founding partner Lloyd Reeb. Welcome, Mike and Lloyd. It is great to see you here. Now, Lloyd, tell me what those 4 big ideas are about finding your passion.
Yeah, thanks, Doug, and thanks for your friendship as always and partnership. And Mike, I've got to admit, I got to think you're closing in on 4 decades in the financial services, but we'll let it go at 3 because your hair stays dark, unlike mine. But, the science, what Doug and I have been exploring is the science of finding your passion or purpose. And there's some big things we learned over the summer that I want to share with you. There are kind of 4 stages of exposure, being reinforced then from the outside, from others, and then reinforced from the joy you experience as you do those things from the inside, and then to the point where that becomes part of your identity. That's the process we find in the science of how people land on an area of interest, like photography, or for me, gymnastics, or developing real estate, whatever your passion is. And the same holds true in this next season of your life. So think of it this way: explore, in other words, a step-by-step process to really gain exposure that you might not have to a wide variety of issues happening in this world and things that God is doing through, reflection, through stories and case studies, through Google searches, for example, through halftime experiences, and interviewing people. Secondly, learn. You once you've explored ideas and you find a few that kind of interest you, go deep into it. Learn how are people's lives being changed in this space? What are the best practices? Do a topical study, get introduced to the people that are leaders in that space, and we can help you with that. And then assess it. Take time to do a low-cost probe where you're going deep enough to really assess what parts of this interest me, and what parts am I good at? What parts should I not do? And then lastly, share it. As you articulate your vision, as you share your elevator speech about what you're exploring next, it becomes part of your identity. So now, Mike, Tim Keller, you and I have both been friends with Tim Keller over the years, and he has pointed out that historically, in historical societies, the heroes of society were those that paid attention to the needs of their family and the needs of society first. The heroes of today's society, though, are people who focus on their own needs and you do you, right? That don't march to the beat of another drummer. And what you and I are talking about today is a third way. It's being keenly aware of the needs around us, starting with our family and our community and around the world and what God's doing. At the same time, recognizing that you and I are uniquely made and we have unique interests and unique skills and a unique purpose. And all of that is throughout the Bible, both of those. And that's my observation that in this process, no amount of just simply smart thinking will help you get to your passion and your calling. I remember an old Chinese pastor came up to me in Asia after I did a sermon in a church, and he said, "Remember, young man, your calling is a gift to receive, not a goal to achieve." And it was deep wisdom from an old saint of God who'd been following God for a long time. So finding your purpose is not something that you and I can script out or execute like a business plan, right? And so another point of distinction that I want to make for us as we shape this conversation is that your calling is not your identity. Your identity and my identity is either shaped by our culture, how they view us and what we consider important or successful, or it's shaped by the unchanging word of God and what God feels about you, his unchanging love for you in all of his wisdom and understanding. So that kind of frames up where we are today, right, Doug? That's what we learned in our last time together on this topic. So let's build on it from there.
Well, but you and Mike have been together for almost 20 years. You've only had to endure me for a fraction of that. But I want to hear more about that. Mike, can you and Lloyd kind of unpack this journey of 20 years?
Yeah, I'd be happy to try, Doug. And thank you both, Lloyd and Doug, for allowing me to join you on this session. My brief career and professional history leading up to halftime was I worked for about 10 years at a large regional bank in a variety of roles, and it was enjoyable and reasonably successful. Then in 1992, at age 33, I married my wife, Marion, and we made our first decision together. We sold my house, both of our cars, and gave away the dog that she had just given me for Christmas. And we moved to New York for me to take an investment role on a bigger stage in New York City. And we were in the Northeast for about a dozen years, and I actually experienced a bit more professional and financial success sooner than I expected. And at around age 40, I found myself being president and CEO of a successful investment firm, which is to say I was living the life I thought I wanted to live, but soon began to realize the cost was very high. I tried for years to have it both ways, sort of all the rewards of the title and prestige that came with it, but with a balanced life. I even went into my boss, the chairman's office one time, and told him I needed a sabbatical, which he reluctantly allowed me to take. About a week or so after I took the summer off, I came back and the rejuvenation benefits were completely gone. I was just burned out. The demands of that role and many roles that this audience has are just very, very high. I was working 70 to 80 hours a week, commuting daily from my hometown at the time, Greenwich, Connecticut, to New York. I also think being in the city in New York City on 9/11 really deeply impacted me. Just everything stopped making sense. It was during this confusing period that I had the great fortune to meet Bob Buford and Lloyd. Bob had a wonderful way of distilling lots of wisdom into short phrases and sentences. And one day he listened to me ramble on about my frustrations, and he just paused and said, "Mike, you can't change the rules of the game, but you can change the game you are playing." And I think what Bob was telling me was, if I were going to try to successfully negotiate a balanced life, I was in the wrong place in the wrong role. It just wasn't going to happen. And I thought a lot about this and concluded he was right. And the second thing Bob shared with me, and he shares this idea in his book Halftime, written back in the mid-90s, or the hypothetical 2-question final examination at the end of life. And the first question being, what did you do about Jesus? And I lived in the South all those years, and there was a church on every corner, and Jesus was on a billboard. I had no excuse for that one. It was the second question that was the really, really challenging one, which was, what did you do with the resources that I entrusted you? Not Lloyd, not Mother Teresa, but Mike Shields. That question was very convicting to me, and I took that to heart. So after much deliberation in order to create some capacity, which is one of the key halftime principles we'll talk about in a few minutes, I decided to actually quit my job in order to free up my calendar and begin the process of trying to figure out what was next. Felt very much like trying to balance a complicated multivariable equation. And so what happened next, after an intense several months of prayer and life planning, Marion and I decided to in 2003 to move back to Charlotte with our 3 young children to be closer to our extended family in North Carolina. I hadn't decided what I was going to do professionally, but I knew I didn't want to miss these next precious years of our kids growing up. And I really wanted to be an actively involved father. I was in my early 40s, and I just couldn't imagine that we would ever regret pursuing a less complicated life and moving back home for our kids to grow up around their aunts and uncles and cousins, and for Marion and me to capture the last chapter of our parents' lives.
And Mike, maybe one of the biggest joys for me in that journey was one sunny afternoon going to elementary school or middle school and watching you coaching Michael's basketball team. And today, he's in med school, right? You had been kind of trading priceless stuff for valuable stuff for years. And even though you were still kind of floundering through this, what do I do next season? What I was gaining great joy in was seeing you doubling down on the stuff that you, like you said, you'll never regret, the priceless stuff. But I do love that you had the courage to push the pause button. I remember talking before you went into the chairman to ask for, a summer off or sabbatical. And, that there's risks involved in that. You're really pushing the chips in the middle of the table. And I think you even sensed that within 30 seconds, he sensed that you didn't have the fire in your belly anymore to pay the steep price to be successful on Wall Street at the time. So, one of the things that you've done that was really helpful was that you pushed along into testing things out, what we call low-cost probes. And so talk a little bit about that. Two things I'd love to know are, how did those processes help you learn about yourself along the way, things that you might not have known in your years in the financial services? And then maybe even more importantly, how did those years of patience and kind of struggling around shape you in ways that are truly important for the role you're playing now?
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd. Great questions. I would say the investment industry, which I loved for so many years, just all of a sudden became less appealing. So in 2003, and you remember this well, I ended up going to work for for Bob Buford, you, and the Halftime organization. I just fell in love with helping others on their journey from success to significance, particularly those peers of ours who were experiencing similar things that I was going through during midlife, when the next bonus or car or promotion just doesn't satisfy. And it was really an incredibly rewarding period, with the biggest reward getting to know and work closely with Bob. Having him as a mentor and a wisdom figure was just incredible. He was by far the most influential person in my adult life, as he reshaped the way I think about and thought about what will really matter in the end. And it became all about intentional living and being faithful with that which God had entrusted me. But what happened in my case, after a couple of years working with the Halftime organization, I actually started missing the investment business. And I had a sense of calling to return to it, but with a different purpose. It wasn't about the thrill of managing big institutional portfolios, or simply making rich people richer. It was really about working with individuals and families committed to using their wealth and other resources strategically and in some sense selflessly, in order to make a difference in the lives of others. But somewhat naively, I thought it would be relatively easy to make this transition back to the world of investing. After all, I'd been sharing all these fabulous halftime coaching tools and helping others transition from success to significance. But I soon discovered there were many obstacles along the way.
Well, serendipitously, Mike, just the dream you had to use all that background to help people make their biggest impact. I got a text here just a few minutes ago from a dear friend that I've been on the halftime journey with, and he's just thanked me for helping him in some small way, but more importantly, he thanked you. He was saying thanks for introducing me to Mike, because he and his team have helped us figure out how to use pretty significant resources to advance God's kingdom in the area of passion that they have, which is foster care and adoption. And I didn't think it was serendipitous that happened just a few minutes ago. It's a capstone on this year. Of course, you and I keep working away at this and helping people like that. But I thought that was just a tender note of encouragement that God sent you this morning. So, Mike, today, this is your passion, or helping talented, affluent people in the same way that you thought you wanted to 20 years ago when you and I first met. But the platform's all different. And one of the important things about finding your purpose is to decouple your purpose from your platform. It gets too confusing if you try to figure it all out together. So what you had to tweak was the platform more than anything, right? So talk a bit about that, how you found this commercial piece was so important, and you found the freedom that was okay, that functioning in a for-profit or the kind of commercial way you are right now can have even bigger kingdom impact than, say, a nonprofit or a traditional, quote, ministry, right?
Yeah, I'd like to maybe address that by focusing on this time-tested halftime process, which really, really works. For some like you, Lloyd, this transition can be quick and seem easy, but for others like me, it can take many, many years and is a lot about trial and error. An important part of the halftime process is, what we call the 3 C's, and getting clear on your capacity, your core, and your context. And in my case, of those 3 C's, the context piece, or what you described as the platform, was by far the most challenging. It was really, really hard. So to quickly go through the 3 C's, capacity is just freeing up time and eliminating distractions. In my case, I was able to actually quit my job to free up the time and margin to have the discipline to shed lesser important things and focus on what was really important. The next C is this idea of a core, who we are at the core. And it's an examination of things like your passion, your giftedness, your temperament, Um, a little harder, but still pretty straightforward, because there are lots of great personality tests out there. Then there are plenty of trustworthy friends that we all have who are willing to give us feedback when asked. And I'll also say I'll put in a big plug for prayer, which really comes in handy when searching for answers. But that leads me to this thing called context. And going into this, I thought that was going to be the easiest of these three C's, but it turned out by far to be the most elusive. I think you and others in Halftime use this phrase, get free, get clear, and get going. And it just seems like, oh yeah, that should work out just that way. But this transition, which is about context and platform, while it is a platform, I found it to be much more complicated and nuanced than that. And, for example, I struggled with questions like, should I join a small firm or a large company? Should I start a new company? Should I stick with the investment industry, which I knew well, or should I try something new? Should I go in as a partner or a senior executive at an existing firm, or maybe try to buy a company or gain operating control? Should it be a healthy firm, or should it have a turnaround element to it? Or perhaps it should be a nonprofit, but in any of these cases, who would be my partners? Were they trustworthy? Would we all be equally yoked? And how should I think about compensation? I mean, I could go on and on and on, but I think you get the point. It really can be complicated. And I'm sure I drove you and Marion and many close friends crazy as I clumsily went through this process. But after a series of frustrations and disappointments, it ultimately became much clearer on what the bullseye looked like for me through this process of elimination. And by the grace of God and many false starts, I was introduced to Piedmont, the current family office platform in which I work, through a friend of mine who had a good sense of the mutual fit between the mission of Piedmont and my investment skill set and really desire to serve individuals and families holistically. So today, I have the privilege of leading a team of talented professionals who serve families in a comprehensive way. We've evolved from a single family office, having served our legacy family, a great family, for over 90 years. We're currently serving generations 4, 5, and 6. We've evolved to a multifamily office in which we're serving, 30 or 35 other families. And this transition has been a lot of fun and very gratifying as we help those clients invest wisely and steward their wealth. And as you mentioned earlier, we also get to experience with our families the joy of generosity as we administer and manage lots of family charitable entities.
Well, Mike, before all our time runs out, why don't we look at the poll? So the question that's in the poll, and it's not too late for you to weigh in on it right quick. We can kind of watch it dynamically as it progresses. So the question is this: which aspect of waiting to find your life purpose do you find the most challenging? 4 answers. The first is the feeling that I'm wasting time that would be more useful invested in my true purpose. The discouragement that I feel when I hit a dead end and have to start over again. The perception that God is punishing me by delaying finding my purpose. And the guilt of losing interest in finding my passion because I've just nearly given up trying to find it. So let's look at how our audience feels today, Mike, and I'd be interested in your thoughts. Very strongly, 72% are the feeling that I'm wasting time that would be more useful invested in my true purpose. So what do you think?
Well, first, let me say this is in large part a conversation about patience and that being an important piece of the puzzle. And I would just say to the audience, be encouraged. No one who knows me well would ever describe me as a patient person. And I guess the second thing I would say is, there is no finish line. This is a lifelong journey of learning and growing, and I by no means have it all figured out. But I do find myself in a good spot today, but only after wandering through a desert for almost a decade, but sticking with these halftime principles that are time tested and proven. And all this is referenced in the halftime, what I think of as kind of the calling card scripture verse, Ephesians 2:10, that we're created to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And in my case, I just trusted that God had something uniquely prepared for me to do, a place to accomplish certain things that would benefit others. And my job was really to discover these things and to be faithful to my calling. Bob Buford had a couple great lines about this. He said that the second half significance is more akin to archaeology than construction, which is the Ephesians 2:10 reference. What I think he meant by this is that we aren't so much building something in the second half. You're actually trying to uncover something which is already there, a path and a journey that you and you alone are destined to walk through. And the second thing Bob said, which is a little more tongue in cheek, I can just picture him saying this: when opportunity come along, don't duck. He would literally duck and to make the point. And I guess in closing, I just have a few final thoughts, kind of regarding this thing about patience. I'm reasonably confident that one of the reasons God allows some of us to have quick transitions is that he needs and wants some time to refine us and work on our character through enduring trials and setbacks. And that's certainly been the case in my life. The second thing is just be really aware of what can get in the way. One of my favorite verses is Mark 4:19, which makes it crystal clear that the cares and concerns of this world and this deceitfulness of riches can choke out all of our best plans and good intentions. A couple other things: just fasten your seatbelt, be prepared for an exciting journey, and be encouraged. Stick with it. It all works out in the end. And I guess finally, in preparing for this time today, I went back and found an email that actually wrote Bob back in 2010. Lloyd, you remember this. He would force us before we'd have those meetings in Dallas to write long and rambling emails to prepare for our time. And I found one of these, and I'd like to read it. My final thought is that halftime has been much harder than I anticipated, but the halftime journey has been so worth it. There is no turning back. I am much clearer on who I am, how I am wired, and what is important. My mission statement remains to invest for eternity and help others along the way. I love strategy, growing things, being part of a virtuous community, and having deep relationships. And focusing on things that matter and encouraging and connecting people. I love engaging with smart, motivated, and honorable people. I prefer a business platform to a nonprofit one. My life and work experience is fairly broad-based. At times, I feel a mile wide and an inch deep, which is valuable in some settings and not in others. I love my wife and my kids and recognize how fleeting life is, particularly the period with children under our roof. With gratitude, Mike.
And Mike, one of the unspoken things in all this is just the joy we've had of being on this journey together. Your wife Marion was up here yesterday for lunch, right, with me up at Lake Norman, and we were working on her next season. She's made big impact through Women of Vision and World Vision, and through the homeless shelter in downtown Charlotte, and and the kids are all gone now, and she's working on what's next. One of the funniest things that happened along the way that we laugh about is, I've been frugal my whole life. And when we first met, you invited me out for dinner. We went to an expensive restaurant, and one of the first things I said to you was, "Do you want to share a meal?" And, coming from New York and the big bank and all that, you looked at me like I was crazy. Well, I've always shared meals with Linda. It saves calories, it saves money. I thought it was normal. You thought I was absolutely crazy. Well, that's part of our story, right?
Right.
It's a little embarrassing, but it's still funny. And
And we've
so-
never shared a meal, right? We've never shared a meal.
Oh dear. So Doug, we guess we're right at the top of the hour. So to honor people's commitments, we should move on from here, I guess.
Absolutely. But Mike, that was fantastic. And I'm one of those people that have continued to kind of endure or develop that patience. But I guess if Moses can do it for 40 years, the least we can do is try and be patient for a few years. Well, we do appreciate everybody joining us. My friend Mike Thomason, though, had a quick question, and I think it bears repeating. Would you recite again, Mike, the archaeology quote? Because I think it was great.
Sure. The archaeology quote, which was Bob's one of his famous ones, was the second half calling is more akin to to archaeology than construction. And the idea being that we're not building something so much in the second half, but we're discovering what is already there.
And like Os Guinness said in his book, The Call, there's no such thing as a calling without the caller. And that ties into that idea, doesn't it, Mike? That this is work prepared in advance for us to do, and that we need to lean into it. And I remember Bob also saying about this, that when you discover your destiny, this was a French poet. I think we might have shared it once before, Doug, but I remember him coming in on a Monday, and he read this over the weekend. He said, there's this French poet that wrote that when you discover your destiny, if you don't follow it, it follows you like an accusing shadow. Mm-hmm. And what I see in you, Mike, now at Piedmont Trust is this is not obviously a career. This is not something you need to do. It's something you can't not do, right? I mean, it's just in you. And that's where the joy comes from. I know that we say you're having the time of your life, and sometimes it feels like the days are hard, right? Investment decisions are difficult. They don't always go up and to the right, but nonetheless, this is what you can't not do.
Right. It's so true. It is a calling. And again, I just come back to this idea for anyone in the audience who might be struggling with this idea of wasting time or it not being easy, hang in there. It really does work out in the end. And there is a plan, and just be faithful to it.
Well, we are a little past the bottom of the hour, and so to respect your time, we're going to shift over to the questions. But again, I appreciate Mike's comment there, because that really, I think, kind of summed up our time today. So thank you, everybody that joined us. Now, those that are willing to hang around, we're going to take your questions. And actually, we have a really neat system here. If you need to run, but you have a question for Mike, even if you type it in the Ask a Question field and need to go, you'll get a unique link where you can hear Mike's answer. So you can leave and still get your question answered. So I hope you'll submit it before running. And for those that want to stay and hear the questions, we're going to go through them one at a time. And Mike, Jacob has a great question here. How would you define the difference between calling and purpose?
Wow. I may need Lloyd's help on this one. Lloyd, do you want to take the first part of that, and I'll take the second?
Well, I think calling, in the Bible is always about the work you've been given to do. In Galatians 6:4-5, it says, give careful thought to who you are and the work you've been given, and then sink yourself into it. So it's obviously built on all the fundamentals of our life, like time alone with God, building your spiritual life, health and exercise and wellness, loving your spouse and family if you're married and have children, investing wisely, all the fundamental stuff. And on top of that, what are you doing with all that? Gifts and strengths are for service, not status. So it tends to be that in our culture, once you've accumulated enough, then you go, and pick up shells on a beach somewhere, perhaps, or play pickleball for the next 20 years. And this idea of calling is a sense of stewardship, that you and I are chief life officer, and we're investing our 168 hours every week as long-term investors looking for a return on life. We're trying to be the soil that produce 30, 60, or 100 fold. So that's how I view calling.
Yeah, and I would just echo that and say that purpose, I think, is for those of us who are followers of Christ, our purpose is the same, to love God and serve God by serving others. But our calling is unique. And again, it gets back to this Ephesians 2:10 verse, that there are some unique things that we are called to do that God prepared in advance for us to walk through. So that's another sort of difference, I would say, between this idea of calling and purpose.
Great answers. Let's move on to the next question. Jacob, I appreciate you submitting that one. Now, Lorraine has the next question. Mike's story resonated a lot to me. I was working with a big insurance company for over 15 years and worked 70 hours a week, but recently decided to resign my job and do some deep life planning. Now, during the waiting period, how were you able to put down the financial struggles aside while trusting God to provide? How do you conquer that hidden fear inside of you?
Wow, that is a great question. I would say I didn't do it that well a lot of the times. That it, even though we know our purpose and identity isn't what we do, it's real easy for that to creep into our lives. And when you give up your business card, when you give up your title, and when you give up the financial rewards of all that, it can be a challenge. But in my case, I'm reasonably confident that is the reason why it took many, many years for me to successfully get on the other side of this transition. God just had a lot of work he needed to do on me and my heart. So I would say hang in there, assemble a group of trusted friends that you can share with. Sometimes we recommend a personal board of directors, but a close group of friends that have the freedom to speak into your life and stay with it. It will be rewarded in the end.
All right, our next question, and this will be our last unless somebody submits it. So Sam asks, unpack a little more about your comment that you felt more led to a business versus a nonprofit. How did you go through the process and make your decision and reach a conclusion?
Yes, that I wish I could give Sam a crystal clear answer or some formulaic approach. But in my case, what I can say is that I burned out in what I was doing and what I had done over the course of 20 or so years, and thought that the nonprofit world was for me. And what better nonprofit than the Halftime organization? It was only after I went into and worked for the Halftime organization, which used to be called Leadership Network, that I discovered that it wasn't the best fit for me as a full-time thing in which I was doing. And I started missing the investment business. So it just became crystal clear to me that I needed to do something about that. In my experience in talking with others, it's probably less clear. And I think that falls into this free will category, just to make wise decisions. But again, I just will go back to this idea: be faithful, stick with it, and it may require a number of low-cost probes and trials and errors, but there is a great place on the other side.
And Mike, the interesting thing about our worlds is my first year in a nonprofit was a foreign mission agency with about 700 missionaries around the world, and I found it was slow paced. They didn't have good rigorous planning strategies. They didn't know how to measure results. And I was looking at the opportunity cost of me not developing real estate every year, and I was wondering, should I just go do more deals and write big checks? Would it be better off than me sitting here being frustrated? And so you don't want to just jump to the conclusion that if you get frustrated in a nonprofit, you should just go back to building more buildings or whatever you were doing. Because what benefited me then, I was about 35 years old, and the chairman of the board, Neil Duff, was the head of HR for Ford Motor Company, and he was 65. And he took me aside and he said, "Lloyd, I'm watching you. You have every excuse to be frustrated. I don't think this organization really understands the value you could contribute. But let me just tell you, you have every reason to go back and just build more buildings. But I know you don't want to do that. So if you want to make a contribution here, you're going to have to just suck it up and learn how to make a contribution here." And I was like, ouch, that hurts. I thought he was on my side. And he said, "Lloyd, look, if you were doing a real estate deal with your partner and a bank turned you down for financing, would you go in the corner and snivel and whine? No, you'd get up, you'd dust yourself off, and you'd kick a door down. You'd keep going. So just stick with it. You'll figure it out." So that's an even more complicating factor. Could it be that the reason I'm frustrated in a nonprofit is because I don't know how to lead in that setting yet, or I'm so addicted to the adrenaline pace of how I was doing real estate as an entrepreneur, or that I just won't learn to bend and flex to be able to work with people who have maybe more heart and less corporate experience than me. So this is, Sam, this is one of the things that makes it difficult. And like Mike said, we had these conversations together, and it's a part of the journey is that you can't do this alone. You really need to be with peers where you can think your confusion out loud and have them encourage you and help you know when to step out and call it quits, and when to stick with it and learn the lessons, right? What would you add to that, Mike?
No, I think that's spot on. And the final thing I'll say related to that is there are just many seasons in life. And at the time the Halftime book was written, it was primarily a midlife, looking back on the first half of life, going into the locker room of life and making some changes, and then heading out to the second half of life with perhaps a new platform and a new purpose, or the existing platform with a new purpose. And I think today that idea is much more refined, and there are many seasons. And so what we're here to do is help people think through this next season of their life, knowing that there may be another one down the road and another one further down the road. So again, just fasten your seatbelt and enjoy the ride, and share with others along the way. And we at the Halftime organization are here to help.
When you say share, do you mean like share meals?
No, won't happen, Lloyd.
Well, Sam, that was a super question. Wow, that uncovered a lot of good discussion. Heather has the next most important question. During your life transition from New York back to North Carolina, did any of your personal values or your priority of values change or become actually more clear and present?
Wow. Heather, I'm going to talk to you one-on-one later about that. I thank you for that question. I would say the thing that became most clear to me, it wasn't so much a change, but was the the importance of family and being a good father, and Marion and I being good parents. When we were in New York, I was commuting and working way too many hours, and I basically didn't see our kids. And so during that process, I just thought I was going crazy. And so what I chose to do was to make some dramatic changes in the way I was living life. And it included moving back here and kind of leaning into simplification and spending more time with our family. In other people's cases, they're different things, but for me, that became crystal clear that if I missed those years, there, under any circumstances, my life couldn't have been measured a success.
All right, we'll move to our next question. Thank you for that one, Heather. Let's see. I have got to jump back right quick because Dale has asked a question, and I clicked the wrong button. Here we go. All right. So, sorry for the delay, Dale. Was your organizing the pilot Halftime Institutes 2004 to 2005 driven by your own seeking? Did it actually help you get to where you wanted to go? It worked for many of us.
Wow. What a great observation. I think there indeed was some selfishness on my part when Lloyd and I and Bob and a couple other individuals had this idea that the Halftime Institute could be a reality, which was at that time was a 24-hour experience with Bob in Dallas that we were fortunate enough to put in motion. I was absolutely trying to figure out my own situation, my own calling. And so I just jumped into the process. We created the Institute. Lloyd knows those years very well, and invited lots and lots of friends to join us on this journey of the transition from success to significance. Lloyd, I'd love to hear your comments because you were there with a front row seat to all this.
Yeah, well, I think whenever you set out to do something to bless other people, it ends up being a blessing in your own life, right? Now, think about stuff you teach in Sunday school. You learn the content more than anybody else. And I think this is one of the joys we have as a team is that as we're helping other people live out their calling and seeking to be the soil that produced 100-fold, it is constantly challenging us as individuals to live this out in our own life. And I just sent my roadmap out for 2022 to my personal board, to each of our 6 children, to Linda, and to you, Mike, asking for feedback to improve on it. I've been doing that for 23 years. You know, the roadmap is a cornerstone of the halftime person's journey because it consolidates all the things you want to see different onto one sheet of paper. And the impact and the blessing I've had from that is immeasurable. And then it's blessing our kids because they're looking over my shoulder and learning how to be chief life officer as they watch me stumble along with my little roadmaps and the things I'm always confused by. And they probably wonder, is he ever going to get this figured out? So, I've often said, I don't know if I've ever had a pure motive. And I think in our best serving, there's always something we're getting back in return, in exchange, right? And so that's just part of this journey. And even in our philanthropy, we know that not only do we have joy in philanthropy, but God, you can't outgive God. So there's always a circle back, and I think I can see that in your life, Mike. Just in your friendships, in your family, your health and wellness, for example. Imagine where your health might be if you'd stayed on the 6 o'clock train in, the 6 o'clock train out. and sitting there and under the stress of Wall Street all those last 25 years. So yeah, and I think I see that in Dale's life.
Yeah, and I would add one other thing, which is, a big idea of Bob's was to embrace the notion that the fruit of our work will grow on the trees of others. And so the kind of the institute and the halftime work is really trying to come alongside people who have an idea, have a passion, have a dream, have a mission, and encouraging them and equipping them to go about achieving what God has in store for them.
Wow. Outstanding questions. Thank you very much, Dale. And you have quite a ministry yourself. Derek has a quick question. Lloyd, this one's for you, and we're going to ask you to kind of rethink one of the things you mentioned earlier. So Derek asks, Lloyd, quick question. You mentioned a verse reference earlier when answering the calling definition, but I may have written it down correctly. I thought you said Galatians 4:5-6, but I'm pretty sure that's not it. Can you help me find that one or restate it?
Yeah, it's Galatians 6:4-5. And what I was quoting was from the Message translation by Eugene Peterson. It's actually a paraphrase. And it says, give careful thought of who you are and the work you've been given and sink yourself into it. So there's three pieces to that. Knowing myself, how God's wired me and the strengths I have and interests, what the work, the opportunities he puts in front of me, and then don't dabble in it, be all in. And, it doesn't mean get it out of balance with the rest of your life, but be all in. And then it goes on to say, don't be impressed with yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. Each of us must do the creative best we can with our own life. And so that's so freeing. Like, I'm not trying to compare myself with Doug's contribution or Mike's contribution. I could no longer run Piedmont Trust and fly to the moon, could I, Mike? And so I struggle along with my own investments and call him up when I'm confused and lost. And so, yeah, it's so freeing to not have to compare yourself with others, but to do the creative best we can with our own life.
Well, that is a fantastic end cap, Derek. I appreciate that question very much. That is our last question. What a great audience we've had today. I really appreciate everybody's great questions. But Mike, especially you, taking all the time that you took to prepare and do this. And Lloyd, thank you for the 20 years that you have poured into not only Mike and so many of the others that are here today. So we thank you for that. Well, this is going to be our last event before the holidays. And so we certainly wish everyone a Merry Christmas, and I hope you'll tune in for next year's events. We've got a nice lineup coming. We'll have more great speakers like Mike, and we're going to continue this topic, and we'll have more series for next year. So, Lloyd, do you or Mike have a closing comment before we wrap up?
Mike?
I would just like to thank those who joined in, and we're all busy, and it's really gratifying and encouraging to us that people would take the time to listen in. And I guess the other thing I'd like to say, there was the person who introduced me to Bob Buford back in 1999 passed away very unexpectedly a week ago. His name was Rick Woolworth, and just a real hero to me and hero to many others. And I just like to offer that up for those inclined to pray for him and all that he accomplished in his life and his family. That that in some sense this will make sense, because he left a deep, rich legacy. He was working on this nonprofit and did so tirelessly for over a decade, called Telemachus, and it was all about mentoring and investing in the next generation of leaders. And so just pray for Rick's family and as they're grieving this great loss.
Yeah, and a joy that that Rick took his calling so seriously over the last 12 years, and since leaving Morgan Stanley, just was all in, and it didn't displace his family time or his wellness or health or golf. He found a way to build a great team and make a leveraged impact. So he's the fruit that grows on Bob's trees, and then they're probably sitting around having a great glass of Bordeaux tonight.
Mm.
Well, and that shows the power of halftime. We're all connected together and share both our trials, but also the great things that happen to our lives. So thank you so much for everybody joining. Again, if you want more information, click on the green button there below and you can contact Lloyd. Mike, Lloyd, Merry Christmas. Everybody in the audience, Merry Christmas. And we look forward to seeing everyone next year. Thank you very much.